Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded. The recording has stopped. This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone. We're trying to fix the audio. Am I audible right now? Naririnig po ba ako? Yes, okay. So you can hear me, but sadly the videos you cannot, right? We're streaming from another Zoom. So, all right. Thank you. Noted po that. Wala pa din.
That or hello, Prof.
Categories good for? Should we really worry about them? And of course, I'm going to say yes. Finally, I'm going to complain at the end. I complain about um, publishers business people are doing, what they're doing wrong, what they can do right, and I'll make a few suggestions because I am retired and I can't be fired, so I can say what I want to, and I'll take advantage of that. Let me begin with the first topic, and that's the critical period of language acquisition. Common wisdom. Everybody seems to know, and there is some truth to this, is that children can pick up languages. They can acquire them. You go to another country, your 4-year-old child, within 2 years, that child will sound like a native. Okay? If child goes later in life, let's say his older brother who's 16, may not have as much success. He may make mistakes. He may have an accent. Is this a solid barrier? Is there anything we can do about it? And I'll give you my history with this idea. Can we improve it? Why do movie actors have such good accents? What is their secret? Talk about that. And again, my obsession, importance of libraries and what we should do about it. Well, let's talk about accents first. This was very important to me when I was a graduate student. I read a book, Eric Linneberg became an important person in my life, called Biological Foundations of Language. But the book was wonderful. Linneberg said, you're small and you're young, before you grow up, either side of the brain can do language. Language can be on the left, it can be on the right. Facial relations can be on the left and the right. As you grow up, language moves over to the left. Ability to do spatial relations moves over to the right. This voyage ends around puberty. Puberty is the time no trouble with other languages. Magic ability to pick up languages seems to disappear at puberty. Linneberg said that's not a coincidence. Voyage of language anywhere in the brain, left side, marks the end, our ability to pick up language, okay? Now, I was very excited about this. I have to admit to you, I was excited with the beauty hypothesis. This major event in the brain happens to coincide with another major event in the brain, the movement of what we call lateralization, being on one side, language acquisition. On the handout, you see I wrote a paper on this, lateralization, language learning in the critical period, published in 1973. This was part of my dissertation. It got a lot of publicity and was very good for my career. Okay. Originally, after I read this, I was so excited to dedicate my dissertation showing that Linneberg was right. And I looked at other data expecting I would show that he was right. I looked at brain damage research. I looked at research on codic listening. When the left ear hears one thing, the right hears another, and you can decide which one you hear better, etc. That's what I found. It's quite a shock. Berg was wrong. Doesn't move the left side of the brain at puberty. This is a lot earlier, maybe when you're 5, maybe when you're even younger. The movement of language to the left coincides with the acquisition of language, not with its loss. Wrote Lenneberg, and he was such a gentleman. He wrote me back and he said, you know, might be right. And found similar things. Oh, interesting. Well, at the time, I gave a webinar around this time with an unknown scholar named Noam Chomsky, the founder of our field. Turns out he and Lenneberg were old friends. They had gone to school together. So I mentioned it to Dr. Chomsky, one of my great heroes of all time. And we decided, interesting slogan to live by. Nothing wrong being wrong. Repeated that to Lenneberg, totally agreed. We learned something. That's the important thing. We pushed the field forward. Left it at that. I didn't think about it much until a few years later, got a dramatic demonstration. You can acquire language any age. Folks, I'm going to say there is no critical period. It doesn't end ever. We can always acquire language. And this was because of the visitor we had at my university or at my school I was teaching at. This was in the 1960s. And I had a job teaching English at a school in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Ethiopia was great. I had such a good time. 3 things happened to me in Ethiopia, which have nothing to do with the talk, but I'll share them with you anyway. First of all, I learned to speak the language, Amharic. I spoke it with Haile Selassie, the emperor. He answered me in English, which was kind of disappointing. Met my wife. She was a teacher at the school, and we've been together ever since, and it's been great. I had my first cup of coffee in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is known for the best coffee in the world. This has nothing to do with my talk, but I really want to share it with you. They had no coffee ever. In those days, I was born in the 1940s. We thought it was bad for you. And my mom would have coffee every morning. Dad brought her a cup, and we thought, Mom, don't do this. It's not good for you. Found out later, it's really good for you. I came to school one day, was completely exhausted. I couldn't find my classroom, anything. Decided I need a cup of coffee. This is the time. One of the teachers, Mrs. Saeed, I'd love to see her again, invited the teachers over for coffee. This is it. I had my first cup, an espresso. Woke up and I felt, this the way everybody feels? Life got much easier. I had more sense of direction. I did better in life, etc. Well, let me tell you what happened then. I'll get back to the topic. At the school I was teaching, this was the Menelik Secondary School in Addis Ababa, we had a visitor. His name was Gerald Mossback. He was a materials writer, in fact. And we had a very nice conversation. We had a nice, very well. He told me about the French class he took in secondary school in Great Britain. Hated it. He hated the method, hated the teachers, grew to hate French. The final exam in this class, we had to have an oral conversation with speakers of French. It was really torture for a teenage boy, let me tell you. He showed up and he decided he would insult examiners. He didn't care. He dressed kind of French, a shirt with the hanging out. He had a cup of dark liquid, which he pretended was wine. He spoke French to them, and he deliberately exaggerated it to make it sound silly and insulting. Sounded like this. He said, bonjour mes amis, je suis très content d'être ici avec vous. Hein? Comment ça va? Loved it. And finally, you're speaking French with a good accent. Why didn't you do that in class? In other words, he had acquired pretty good accent in French. Even though he was past the critical period, he was already in his 20s, had it and didn't know that he had it. Talked to him about it. He said he couldn't speak that way in public. It wasn't him. It wasn't natural to him. but it sounded good for French ear. This was the birth concept, I think, is very hopeful. The output filter, a hypothesis I've been working on since then, a colleague of mine, Michel Mashtari, and this is our belief that accent means group you're a member of. That may be the purpose of accent. Tell people group you are a member of. If you use the accent and you're not a group, member of the group, feels wrong, feel uncomfortable. When I meet someone from London, I speak with a British accent. And a little bit. Not me, British. So there's this output filter prevents us being perfect. I had a couple of other incidents which come to the same. A few years after that, I gave some talks in Paris. My daughter came with me, which was great fun. A local scholar, a French professor at the Sorbonne, the big university, we had a nice conversation. He invited me to coffee. What do you do in Paris if you want to have a serious intellectual conversation? You find a coffee shop. So that's what we did. And a really nice conversation. She told me about work and sociology of language. And I talked about my work in my theory. We spoke French, but really thinking about it. We didn't say, let's speak French. Okay. It was her first language, and I'm okay in French. So we just started speaking French. Daughter, who was a teenager, 12, 13 at the time, most of the time in video games, was close enough to us to come over and check out what we were doing. And her French was better than mine. She was going to a French school. She spoke it very well. When we were leaving, she said, French was so good. Didn't know you spoke French that well. Neither did I. With a member of my club. Their scholar didn't think twice about it. It felt natural. Here's another incident. Years later, did a week of guest lecturing in Budapest. I met a fascinating person there. Her name Lomb, Lomb, Ato, the world's great polyglots. I was lucky I met her. She was about 85 at the time, so who knows. And we got along very well. She invited me to her apartment. We had long talks about being a polyglot. She did the whole thing in Budapest. She picked up all these languages, and I still quote her a lot. Anyway, a little later, my wife and daughter to Budapest. They were on a tour of Europe, and they stopped by to see me. I went home with them after that. And Lom Kato and I and my wife and daughter chatting, having a nice conversation. Kato got up and she said to me, Stephen, come with me into the kitchen. Help me make some tea. Didn't need me to make tea. He wanted to share something with me, something profound in my opinion. And this is what he told me. He said, felt quite comfortable with your wife and daughter. I felt even more comfortable with you. I think it's because I knew you a little bit better. We had spent some time together. I think it's because we were talking about our work, something that we generally talk about very much. We feel comfortable. So this is the beginning, the end of the critical period, beginning of what we call the output filter. Well, the question that always comes up is, what about actors? How do they do it? They have these great, great accents in movies. One of the best, let's talk about him. I decided to investigate Peter Ustinov. Saw the movie Top Copy, you know how good he is. And when you see him in a French movie, French people tell me his French is perfect. He does the accent absolutely perfectly. And he does German very well. I've heard him lecture in German, is really, really good. So how did he do it? In his interviews, he says, when he's going to do an accent in a movie, language he's not really good at, he doesn't study it. He thinks of someone he knows, speaks the language, he imitates them. Interesting. He speaks the language in the real world, say as a conversation in French, in the real world, not part of a movie. as an English accent. This is interesting. We'll come back to this, okay? Now, how can you get better if you've hit puberty? After the critical period is over, the popular view, you've really got to work on it. If you really, really work on it, you can get a good accent. It doesn't matter how old you are. I call this the hard work hypothesis. Amy Hammond wrote about it in 1990. Hammond interviewed adult native speakers native speakers of Spanish who were taking English class in Spain. Had English for an average of 2 to 5 years. All agreed, or half of them agreed, it's important to get rid of your Spanish accent. And you shouldn't have an accent. Accent is bad. Accent is bad. 83% said accent is a negative factor. Now, here's the big sentence. Yes, do you agree with this idea? Hardworking and intelligent people can always succeed eliminating a foreign accent. Half of them said yes. In fact, 20% agreed very strongly.
People think you can overcome accents, and you can get better any time in life. And in our terms, you can overcome the output filter. I had very interesting evidence that this is true. And in order to tell you about it, I have to use a little bit of profanity. So if you excuse me, I want to repeat it as I was told. A friend of mine got memberships. We were in Los Angeles, and we got memberships at the old gym, weightlifting, right, where all the big shots work out, etc. My friend was really into weightlifting, and we went to Gold's together. I went there anyway. I liked it. And he decided to take lessons with a trainer from Gold's. And the two got along very well. They had nice conversations. My friend, though, that I brought there, speaks English with a Spanish accent. Okay. He had been in the United States 12 years when I was with him in the gym, and he still had his English was great. It's brilliant. But he has this slight but noticeable accent. And they were having this, here comes the profanity. This is in the interests of our profession. His trainer made this comment, very friendly, and said, "You've been here for 12 years and you still have that fucking accent?" In other words, the expectation is if you work hard and care, you can get rid of the accent. And there are ways of doing it, and you should do them. I had an interesting experience with this a little after this. A businessman from Germany came to Los Angeles and wanted to hire an expert. And everyone said he should hire me. And he had a problem with languages, and I'm the one who can help him. I got into this expensive limousine, and I was driven up to the Hollywood Hills where the expensive homes are. And I met this German businessman who had a very light accent in German. He wanted perfect. He wanted perfect English, no accent. He wanted to get rid of accents. Well, I told him what I just told you. It's not so easy. Okay, there's an output filter, and we are hesitant to use the perfect accent, etc. Do you know what he said? He said, "You can leave now. I have no use for you." And he called a limousine. And I said, "Wait, how about if I told you I could get a sound spectrograph, and I would say a sentence into the spectrograph in my perfect English, and you would try to imitate it?" He said, "Yes, that would do it. Hard work, repetition, and good technology." To me, this is a confirmation that most people think you can do it if you know how and you work hard enough. Okay. So what are the effects and lessons in pronunciation? Can we really do it? Well, I've looked at the research on pronunciation drills. The first thing I looked at was accent improvement classes. And there was an advertisement for it on this network, by the way, before we started our show, that you can call in and get lessons and your accent will get better, etc. The effect on direct instruction on pronunciation is very, very limited. It's exactly the same as grammar. If you're an adult and you're speaking a second language and you've studied grammar, yeah, you can use the grammar rules as long as certain conditions are met. You know the rules, you're thinking about correctness, and you have time. Then you can sound a little bit better. It's very hard to subconsciously acquire it, but you can learn it and you can monitor it. I found descriptions of accent improvement classes, advertisements. I found 6 descriptions of commercial accent improvement programs. Only one of the 6 bragged that they had evidence that it worked, and the only evidence they had was an unpublished master's thesis. I found another paper on it, Saito and Leister, which is very good, actually. Saito and Leister looked at 15 studies of accent improvement. They found only one study where it seemed to work, where instructions seemed to have a real effect on someone's accent. Okay. It was Japanese speakers, and they focused only on the R sound, and they really worked hard. People had 4 hours of instruction. They got corrected when they got it wrong. They met for 2 weeks. This is the only study I have ever found that shows that instruction will really help you get a better accent. What Saito says in his review, what we don't have is leave the person alone for 2-3 years. Let's see if the accent's really there, and without constant correction and feedback. Good points. In other words, there is no evidence that you can teach accent. Wow. I think it is possible by lowering the output filter, but in general, no, it's very, very difficult. Now I want to get to libraries, and this is some current news. I think we can do a lot of good in the world very quickly. There was a big controversy. I heard about it in the United States in Vermont over the libraries in Vermont. The Vermont State Libraries decided they were going to get rid of all the books in their libraries. And everything would be not on books, but digital. Now, there's good economic reasons for doing this. You free up lots of space. Get rid of all the books, and you have lots of space. Okay, great. And you could use the space for other purposes. Okay, we're going to see that selfish capitalism is going to be the villain here and in other places. Okay. Well, it turns out a book was written by Naomi Barron, which I bought right away, which I thought was really good, called How We Read Now. And she looked at the literature and she found you do a better, if it's serious reading, if it's academic reading, you're better off with a paper book with covers and all that stuff. You learn more as you read. You understand more when you read. The people they interviewed were able to focus better from a physical book. We all have this idea. I download stuff all off the computer all the time, things on digital. I gotta download it. I have a hard time reading it off the screen, and I'm not the only person who has this problem. So I have to do it anyway. So it turns out that digital is not very efficient for serious reading. For light fiction, it's perfectly good. And there are good reasons to have books in libraries. There are other reasons why. Libraries give you space to relax, sit back, sit at a table, read and write. This is fine for middle-class people like most of us. We can download it, print it out, we can buy the book. For children of less wealthy families, this is not so easy. I saw this firsthand when I was a graduate student. The library I looked at UCLA's library, before that, University of Illinois, had lots of real books. I spent a lot of time in those libraries browsing. The books were there. The journals were there. I didn't have to download them. I didn't have to look at them on tape, the whole thing. I made a lot of progress in those years looking at articles. I remember once I noticed that the library at my university, University of Southern California, had the complete collection of journals starting with like 1890 all the way up to 100 years of language arts. everything on literacy development, language development. I spend hours browsing those journals, looking at the articles. When it's not digital, when it's paper, you can do it fairly quickly. I got 4 really important papers out of that. I made great discoveries because they were there, easy to find, and convenient. I like books, okay? Um, I like having the space available for thinking, quiet studies. The Vermont's big decision to make all libraries digital is going to make life harder for a lot of students. Those students won't complain because they're not wealthy. They don't know how. Universities, I have heard one of the letters I wrote, may find the savings irresistible. My final sentence, it's a move that will help ensure that college is for children of the wealthy. So just ordinary old-fashioned books are terrific. By the way, you found out in the beginning that I have a website where I have all my stuff on digital, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I like people to read my book, The Power of Reading, which you can download. I'm happy to tell you, you can get a used copy for $1.50 American. That's a good deal. If I were you, I'd get the used copy, okay? And I tell people in terms of Naomi Barron's book, I say, get the real copy. You'll learn more from it. You'll be able to underline the notes. Little things like this can really push us forward. Well, I'm going to come to a glorious conclusion. It will take me a while to do it. Or I do some complaining, as if I haven't done it. There was a letter written to Education Week, which I read regularly. It's one of the few things I can afford to subscribe to. I can download stuff. It's good. And it says, the letter top, educators, not companies, should shape artificial intelligence. In this case, writing bots, etc. Here's what I wrote to the newspaper. I'm waiting to see if they'll publish it. I was amazed and very happy to read this in Jaime Mundo's letter to the editor of Education Week. Educators, students, and families, not corporate interests, should shape learning. I changed that not just to shape artificial intelligence, but it should shape the development of all educational programs and materials. We have to do what's right for learning, making progress, not to make corporations more money. Not corporate interests should shape the development of all educational programs and materials. If we do this, our policies will benefit and profit the entire society and not just make the rich minority richer. Thomas Jefferson, 3rd President of the United States, and known for his insight, commented on this soon after he became President of the United States. He decided the biggest enemy of politics was newspapers. We can easily do without newspapers rather than do without governments. So here's what he said. His rhetoric is a little complex. It is a melancholy truth. A suppression of the press, getting rid of newspapers, could not more than completely deprive the nation of its benefits, done by its prostitution to falsehood. That's what newspapers are doing. It's prostitution to falsehood, making money by not telling the truth. Jefferson's conclusion, nothing can now be believed which is seen in newspapers. I read newspapers all the time. In the morning, I found out a way of looking at editorials and letters to the editor to newspapers all over the world, and I check them out. I write at least one letter to the editor every day. I post them on the website because most of them don't get in, and that's okay with me. They get to be seen there, and people get to see them, which is the important thing. Most letters are not published. The New York Times gets 1,000 letters every day. So I post all my letters on Facebook. If you'd like to see what I'm thinking nearly every day, go to Facebook. You'll see a letter, and I'll say not accepted by the so-and-so journal. but as you know, writing it out makes you understand it better. A wonderful paper I love talking about was written by Richard Allington about 10 years ago. Richard Allington did pretty much the same kind of research I do, research into literacy. And here's what he says. He says, you say it in a newspaper, someone's going to believe it, no matter what you say. All it seems to take is for someone to tout the message, and lots of folks can be convinced that research says, even though research says nothing of the sort. This is happening in the United States today in phonics. We say we've got these scientific studies. No, you don't. When they say that, I publish something in Facebook and I say, you guys in the science of reading, you've got all this evidence, tell me about it. Post it. Let me see the arguments. I've told nearly 600 people about it. I have received not one absolute article about it. Allington says, he talks about phonics, claims have been made that systematic phonics has been proven to be superior, supported by hundreds of studies. Allington asked for research citations, received none. Here's Allington talking. I really admire him for this. Claims that hundreds of studies show cannot be accepted as face value. In such cases, request copies of the research, at least the citation, so we can look it up. These are like these commercials that say 4 out of 5 doctors recommend this pill for losing weight, right? Who are the doctors? Where they live? Have they done studies? Have this their pre-test, a post-test? No, there's just these claims. And this is what Thomas Jefferson has been complaining about. So this is how we're going to change the world. Well, I think I've gone far enough. I want to make sure there's enough time for questions. We can take our time in answering them. So let's take a 1-minute relaxation and be ready for your questions.
All right. Yes, sir. Have your water break. Thank you so much for these brilliant ideas and insights. The floor is now open for your questions. You may type in your questions in the chat. And I would also like to request our EdTech team to please kindly share the questions from the other Zoom to this chat. Thank you so much.
We'll do that, sir.
Okay, I'll ask and answer the first question. Here's the first question. Professor Krashen, you might as well admit that you have been a failure. You've been working on this stuff for 50 years. And what has happened? Practically nothing. Nobody uses it. Nobody knows anything about it. What use are you? Well, that's actually a very good comment. Let me give you my reactions to that. It's a fair question. I'm glad you asked. In my neighborhood where I live is a community college. I won't mention any names, the Santa Monica Community College. And because I live close by, I get their catalog for free in the mail. And whenever the catalog comes, I look at the foreign language classes and I look at the description. There's lots of offerings in Spanish, German, French, Italian, all the languages that are commonly taught. And there are ESL classes too that you can sign up for. I look at the description of the courses. They look as if they were written in 1945. They never mention comprehensible input. They never mention natural approach. They never mention listening comprehension. They describe the program in traditional ways. We do grammar the first year, we do grammar the second year, we work on spelling, students get their errors corrected, all the things that we have disproven. And I'll tell you why this is true and what we can do about it. How can you find out what the theory is? Well, you can go to webinars like this one, but very few people have the chance to do this. You can buy a book by Krashen. I don't recommend it. They're too expensive. I can't afford them. I look at my books on Amazon, they're $30, $40, $50. My goodness, I can't afford books like that. Okay. Not only that, the articles are much too long and they're impossible to read. I find them nearly incomprehensible. So this is why I put things out. This is why I keep writing short articles for newspapers. At least they start to get around. And this is a problem that we have to outgrow until we find an easy, cheap way of doing it. By the way, I'll tell you what I did last week. I took the research very seriously that we understand more from books than we do from digital. And I have asked one of my publishers to see if we can come out with cheap hardcover or at least semi-hardcover books so they don't cost so much and people can read them with understanding. Okay. Which among the 5 hypotheses can be considered obsolete? Sorry, Jean-Pierre, none of them. You're more surprised than I am. They're all pretty good. The acquisition learning hypothesis has to remain. It's really 2 hypotheses. The input hypothesis, yes. The affective filter hypothesis, and now we have the output filter hypothesis. To my amazement, they have all stood the test of time. And I invite people to try to disprove them. Okay. Okay. Catherine Katamora asked a wonderful question. Wonderful questions are questions I'm prepared to answer. That's one of them. Is it advisable in bilingual instruction? How do we do bilingual instruction for someone with a limited oral vocabulary? I think it's pretty easy. The initial reading, the initial instruction is in the first language. That's for sure. The first language is the best way forward. Here's how we know. The more you read in general, the more you read in general, the more you know. The more you know about everything. There's wonderful research on this. People who read more know more about every single subject you can think of when they read novels, when they read fiction, etc. So the more you know, the more you'll understand. The more you understand, the faster you acquire. So I encourage continued heavy reading in the first language. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, I can go right on to the question of AI.
All right. From
Okay.
Eliza Gomba, looking to the future, how do you envision the continued integration of AI into language education? And what challenges and opportunities do you foresee?
I'm going to surprise you. So far, I don't see any use for artificial intelligence and writing box, GPS, all that stuff. I think it's a waste of time so far. I'd like to be proven wrong, but I haven't so far. I'll tell you why. It has to do with the nature of writing. Writing, if you want to get to be a better writer, you don't write more, you read more. But writing won't make you a better writer. But here's what writing does. Writing makes you smarter. Writing helps you think, makes you think through your ideas. Here's what I have found looking at what great writers have said. They have said you write something down and you have a writer's block, right? You're familiar with that phrase, a writer's block. You don't know what to say next. You're confused. You're not sure of your ideas. That's good. When you get a writer's block, it means you're going to learn something new. What do you do when you get a writer's block? Get up from the chair, walk around, do something mindless. If the heat is down in the room, make the heat a little higher. Go in the kitchen and wash 2 dishes. Then come back to your work. You'll find that while you were gone, your subconscious mind was working on this. And part of the solution to your problem will be there. Here it is. Your subconscious mind wants to help you. That's what I've learned from this. Let me tell you what I do when I'm in a hotel room. And before I started staying home, when I was still home, I'd go to a conference, check into the hotel, go to the hotel room, right? And nobody's quite there yet. You don't see anyone, you don't socialize. So what do? Here's what I do. Here's what I would do now. Take my suitcase, put it on the bed, go to my desk, open up the computer, start working on the paper I'm working on now. I run into a writer's block right away. I get up, go to the bed, open the suitcase, take out 2 shirts, hang them up, go back to my writing. 3 minutes later, another writer's block. 5 minutes, there's always a block. Then I go put away 3 more shirts. Okay, then I can move on to the underwear next. Okay. At the end of the evening, I have unpacked my suitcase. I put everything away. The room is in order, and I've made progress on the paper I've been writing on. This is very similar to what we call meditation, opening yourself up to the small, quiet voice inside you. Gandhi said that. I think it was right. That's where insight comes, from silence, from your subconscious mind. It's you, and you're taking advantage of the partnership your subconscious wants to help you with, which means don't try to think of new ideas when you're driving. When you have a new idea, you got to write it down right away. Otherwise, it'll disappear and you'll never get it back. So when you're driving, don't stop and start writing. Just listen to the radio and enjoy it. Okay, don't write and think of new ideas at the same time.
Thank you, sir. Another question from Lydia Zawardakura. What approach can be used for very young learners who have no exposure to the English language?
Here's the answer. Stories. More stories. What good language teachers do these days, I got this from my colleague, Benico Mason, who really invented this method. When she teaches English as a foreign language in Japan, the first semester is listening to stories. The teacher's telling stories in class. She takes the stories from the classic collections, so you know the stories are going to be good. In her words, they have stood the test of time. She reads them in advance, takes out, underlines the hard words, is ready with a synonym, or is ready to draw a picture. There were 2 old men. She draws a picture of a man with a beard and a cane, 2 old men. That's how you make it comprehensible. She has found, and I did a study with her on this, she has found when you hear a story and there's a word you don't know, don't look up the word. Don't present the new word. Tell a story. Each time you hear a word in a comprehensible context, you get a little bit of the meaning. And gradually, more stories, you'll get the meanings of the words. At the end of the first semester, they've heard hundreds of stories and they're ready to start reading. And they've had a good time. Imagine this. Let's say you're in English class and it's the first class in the morning and you're not really a morning person, okay? You come to school, your first class is story time. Isn't that nice? The teacher reads stories, tells a story, makes it interesting, makes it comprehensible. A glorious, wonderful way to begin the day. Stories and reading in the first language is what you do right away. So gradually, as the students get better, toward the end of the first semester, the beginning of the second semester, you start reading. Let me tell you about reading. You read from, I got one right here. You read from what are called graded readers. This is a graded reader. I have graded readers. The only languages I found them in, they're in English, they're in Spanish, and they're in Mandarin, Putonghua. And they have nice collections of graded readers. The students come into the classroom the first day. On the table are stacks of graded readers with different ideas in them, different stories. The students try them out and pick out the one they want to start with. And they don't have to finish it. They can go to another one. that gets them started reading. I learned about this in my experiences with Spanish. I live about 30 minutes from the local supermarket. And I found out that they started to open early. They changed their hours. They're going to start opening at 6:30 in the morning. Great, because I'm old. I'm now a morning person. So I went in and there was a new guy taking care of your groceries. And his name was Fidel. Now that's a Hispanic name. So of course I started speaking Spanish to him. My Spanish at that time, it's better now, wasn't very good, but I did it anyway. He answered me in English. And he said, it's a rule of the store that we have to speak Spanish with everybody. I continued in Spanish. I said, Fidel, tú puedes ayudarme, you can help me. Me metes a hablar español como ustedes. I want to speak Spanish the way you do. Hablamos español. Fidel has been speaking Spanish to me for the last couple of years. He's introduced me to all the other workers there, and they speak Spanish to me. And it's lots and lots of fun in the store. Okay. I've become a hero in the local supermarket. I'm getting better in Spanish, no question. I ran into a friend who noticed that I sometimes speak Spanish with. He said, Steve, your Spanish is so much better. What's your secret? It's not from talking to Fidel. Fidel only has 2 minutes to talk to me. He has other customers, so we don't talk very much. Instead, I go home and I read these books. I've been reading books in easy Chinese and easy Spanish. I read in this one today, okay? And what's happening with graded readers, this is important, gang, they are gradually becoming literature. They're getting better and better. And I've learned who the good authors are, and I love them. I'll give you an idea of what they're like. My favorite author in Spanish is a woman named Adriana Ramirez. And she wrote one of the stories. She wrote, the hero of the story, the narrator, is American who doesn't speak Spanish very well. And he leaves his hotel looking for another hotel where he's going to meet some friends, and he gets lost. He meets another young man who says, look, I can help you. Where are you going? And he says the name. He says, I'll take you there, speaking slow and easy to him. As they're walking, 3 beautiful young ladies come rushing up to his new friend, who call him the guide. And they hug him. They kiss him on the cheeks. They hold his hand. What's going on here? He introduces his new friend to the young ladies. They hold his hand and they hug him. Finally, they arrive at the other hotel. And his new friend says, I suppose you're wondering what's going on here. Nothing. This isn't romance. This isn't the way we're like this in this town. This is our culture. This is the way we are. I've known 2 of these girls since they were babies. They're my cousins. Okay. We are very demonstrative and very physical. There's nothing romantic about it. It's just the way we are. The whole book is like this, where she brings you into strange situations. You wonder what's going on. And then she explains it in comprehensible Spanish. You can see that these stories are getting better and better and better. I'm very happy with graded readers. I think they're wonderful. I'm reading, as I told you, reading some in Chinese. I've taken a few classes from this teacher. They're really interesting. Okay. So this is good news. Graded readers, check them out. And may
Thank
I
you, sir. Yes, sir.
also give you free advice. Try this in a language you don't speak well. It'll make you a better teacher. Okay.
Thank you. From Mary Joy Guevara, in the Filipino context, regardless of purpose, we are expected to always have an accent in speaking the English language. Not having an accent means you are not good enough. What insights can you share regarding this matter? Thank you.
Keep talking, and eventually people will figure it out. And you can say, accent means club membership. We should write an article for one of the local Filipino stations, newspapers. What does an accent mean? Might be a good project. An accent means the group of people you associate with. It doesn't mean you're better. It doesn't mean you're worse. It's simply a marker of club membership that needs to be explained.
All right. And I think there's a follow-up question on that, in that line. What are the key challenges and biases associated with native and non-native speakerism in language and teaching? And how can educational institutions and language programs promote equality and inclusivity in language education?
Well, I'm trying to do my best to change all that in that I speak other languages in public. I have an accent and I make mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You need a famous person to do that. Say, this is normal. An accent means it's group membership. We're reluctant to use it with members of a group that we're not a member of. There's nothing wrong with it. Be happy you can communicate.
Thank you, sir. Actually, there are more questions, but we can just maybe select a few because we're beyond time already. From Kevin Kitson, in terms of teaching and learning a new language, would you recommend that it be done face-to-face or virtually? Which modality could yield better results?
Thank you, Kevin. Good question. The answer is yes. The answer is both. I would do face to face. I would do it virtually. Virtually means reading. Virtually means watching good movies where you get it's comprehensible input that counts. And reading is one of the fastest ways of making progress in another language. Most of my Spanish has been through reading, most of it. And when I talk to people, I have acquired so much through reading. I really do okay. And as I do more conversation, it will gradually get better. But reading has been the foundation that makes it comprehensible. I think it's a wonderful thing for beginners. So the answer is both, of course. And don't avoid one, just do more.
All right. Thank you so much, our dear participants, for your questions. And thank you, Sir Steve, for answering them. As much as we would like to entertain more, we don't have much time anymore. Sir, some closing thoughts to wrap things up?
Oh gosh. We acquire language in one way, only one way, when we understand it. So doing it through reading, doing it through listening, having conversation are legitimate as long as it's comprehensible input. The trick in reading, self-selection. Read books that you want to read, that you think are interesting, not something someone has assigned you. I'll leave you with this observation. When I was in secondary school in the United States, in English, we had what's called language arts. And what we did in language arts was we read the classics. One year it was all the American literature classics. The next year it was all the British literature classics. Today, I remember none of these books, not one, zero. The books I selected by myself, I remember nearly all of them. They made a huge difference. Let me tell you what I read. This will be my summaries and comment. First of all, I read lots and lots of science fiction. I've read science fiction in French, I've read science fiction in German, a little bit in Spanish, because I like science fiction. Those books I remember. Those books changed me, no question. The other thing that I read, believe it or not, was baseball stories. Tell you a little bit about the baseball stories. The author's name was John R. Tunis, and he wrote 9 novels made up a mythical baseball team, mythical players, used Brooklyn Dodgers, okay? The books he wrote, I still think about. In fact, I meet with a friend of mine sometime and we reread some of them and talk about them. They are literature. They give you a better idea of what life is about and how to behave. In one book, by the way, a reviewer reviewed this book and said it was similar to the book of Job. It was the boy's book of Job. The the book is called The Kid from Tompkinsville, and the main character is a pitcher, throws the ball. The hitter's supposed to hit it and then runs to first base. Well, in this book, one of the very young players, it's like in his 20s, is appointed manager of the team, which is very unusual. Usually the manager of the team is in your 30s, your 40s. But this time the owner thought this guy was really good and appointed him as manager. He gave a sermon to the players, which I have a copy of, which I've reread many times, and says, when you hit the ball and you know someone's going to catch it or throw it to first base, you won't make it. Run anyway. Run as fast as you can. Someone may drop the ball. It may be a wild throw. And maybe because of you, because you didn't run fast enough, you weren't serious, you may lose the game. So the word I like to use is be perfect, be impeccable. And I've thought about this, even the little things. When I talked about this to my doctor friend, we met for coffee and talked about these books. He said, this is true of medicine. You have a patient, and the patient has an ordinary disease. You know the cure, this pill, etc. Be impeccable. Make sure the patient has it right. Make sure he knows the correct dose. Make sure what the possible side effects are and that he knows about them. And make sure he takes the medicine. Check up on him. In other words, be impeccable in everything you do. And I have learned this. When I wash the dishes, I make sure I set them out to dry. I make sure I put them away at the end. Don't let them sit around. I don't let food sit out so germs will crawl around, etc. It's a wonderful, wonderful demonstration. The other one I read, the other novel I read, which was a good lesson. Let's see, there's I think I did it. The Kid from Tompkinsville was the first one. Yeah, I've said both that I want to say. So that's it. Even this very light fiction contains profound messages. Fiction is important. An advantage of reading light fiction, of any fiction, is that people who read understand other people more. One radio hostess said this on the air. When you read fiction, you become the other person, the main character of the novel. You do what they do, you see what their thoughts are, you learn more about the human race. Noam Chomsky said, we'll probably learn more about human psychology from reading novels than from reading scientific psychology. So I'm in favor of all these things. Self-selection.
Thank you so much, Sir Steve. Our heartfelt and sincere thanks again for sharing your brilliant ideas with us and for your ongoing contributions to the world of language and literacy development and beyond. We're very much grateful. And now let's all listen to the closing message from the Dean of the Far Eastern University Institute of Education, Dr. Rosarito Swatenko. Dean? Uh, your mic, please.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Stephen. How to all the our participants in today's experts lecture. I'm very glad that we are here. We are all here listening to Dr. Stephen Krashen as he talks to us about the things that we read actually in his books and those quoted by other scholars based on his work and his research. And I like the fact that Dr. Krashen shared with us so many things that will give us a very good grounding on how we will see our work theoretically, conceptually, and of course, practically. I like the fact that Dr. Krashen mentioned to us that the old good advice that he elaborated to us, like reading, being interested with people, and also having really a good fun listening to people and getting interested in what they know and being able to share that joy with them is something that we teachers need to think about as we do our daily tasks, sharing the language, the English language to our dear students, and helping them in their literacy journey. So, with that, thank you very much, Dr. Stephen. As always, I like the fact that he mentioned about the accent study, and I think Dr. Mabuwan would be very much interested with that. And I hope we can collaborate with Dr. Krashen on doing a similar thing for our Philippine languages, because we have 170 plus Philippine languages, and I think that will be a very interesting study that the Institute of Education can look into. So with that, good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to Dr. Krashen, and nice to be with you this afternoon and this early morning with Dr. Krashen's time zone. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so much, Dean Rose, and again, Dr. Krushen. Now, before we finally close this event, may we request everyone to turn on their camera for a quick group photo? Yeah, we always love taking photos.
Or we would have the group photo first here.
Yes.
Actually, nakikita tayo ng participants. We're visible, but there will be two screen captures.
All right. Okay, please turn on your cam, Miss Marie's. Okay, three, Sir Ray, 3, 2, 1, smile. All right.